on Bobby Brown. Did you know that in 1952, his unit that he was in Korean War, that his unit ended up in Korea, and on the first day of the World Series, he was trudging up a quay for a quarter of a mile with everything he owned on his back going into Korea, and his team was in the World Series, and he was a battalion surgeon on the front lines in Korea. I mean, he's Alan Alda, is what he. Even Alan Alda wasn't on the front lines. Hawkeye. He was back. He was. I guess at times he was, right? At times he was. Anyway, I just wanted to get that on. R.D. Rosen. Boy, did I get lucky finding this. Atlantic Monthly Press. It's a book about Sid Luckman. It's called Tough Luck. It's about Sid, Murder Incorporated, and the rise of the modern NFL. And if you think R.D. Rosen's just a Bear fan who happened to write a book about their best quarterback they've ever had, he's also won the Edgar Allan Poe Award for Strike Three, You're Dead, his first of 5 mystery novels featuring a retired Jewish Major League Baseball player turned detective. He was a senior editor for ESPN Books and wrote for Saturday Night Live. This guy's a big guy. Somehow we found him. We get a chance. We talk to Richard D. Rosen now as he joins us here. Richard, nice to talk. Christopher Russo, how are you today, pal? Okay?
Thanks, Chris. I'm doing great. Glad you could find me.
We couldn't find. Where the hell were you? We tried everywhere, for crying out loud. Well, we finally found you. Which is, I read your acknowledgments last night, and I had your agent there, and I said, Eddie, try the agent, and he did, and we got lucky. You found Sid Luckman. I'll tell you that. Hell of a job. You lived right in this own same neighborhood. You're a Bear fan. Let's talk about your love of Sid Luckman first. Go ahead. Let me hear.
All right. This book checked all the boxes. My love of Sid Luckman, Jewish families, murder, the Louis Lepke and organized crime. But it all began when Sid Luckman moved into my neighborhood in Highland Park, Illinois, in his 30s. He had 3 kids. I was a little too young to have seen him play. I think everybody in the world is now too young to have seen the guy play. But we knew this guy had moved into the neighborhood. It was kind of just another Jewish family, except the father happened to be the greatest Jewish quarterback of all time then and still is today. So I was obsessed with the Bears, and I've often wondered why I didn't walk the 100 yards to his house and introduce myself. But, 10-year-old kids find it hard to do that. So I just watched the whole thing from afar. He had a beautiful, beautiful daughter named Gail. We would play touch football in a field right across the street from Sid Luckman's house and wait for Gail Luckman to pass coming home from junior high with her books. Anyway.
Wow.
My whole life, Sid sort of has loomed over my love of the Bears, my interest in sports history, and he was one of those childhood heroes that I never got to see play. But of course, he was an immense influence on the NFL. So let's cut several decades forward, and I'm sitting on my couch. This is just 3 years ago, and because I love old sports films, I'm watching YouTube clips of Sid Luckman in action, which I hadn't known existed. And that got me very, very excited. And I started to Google Sid, and I stumbled on a single mention of the fact that Sid Luckman's father had murdered his own brother-in-law in 1935, and he had gone to prison for this. And I couldn't, this just wasn't possible. It didn't compute. Sid Luckman and his family in a middle-class suburb north of Chicago, and his father had possibly been a member of Murder, Inc. So I tracked down the journalist who had plopped this into a blog of his, and he told me the following story. Do you want me to stop talking so you have a chance?
No, you're done. I'm mesmerized, and I read the book for crying out loud. A superb job. Go ahead. Let me hear.
I was mesmerized during the whole process, I have to say. So I tracked down this guy in Washington, Dan Daly, who was a sports columnist, and he told me, I said, I've just read on your blog that Sid's father kills his own brother-in-law. That can't be true. And he got upset. He said, of course it's true. I said, how could people not know this? He said, I don't know. I said, how do you know it? He said that he was compiling a bunch of anecdotes for a book he published called about NFL Miscellany. And he was having a cup of coffee with one of his fans, a guy in his 90s. And this is right after Sid Luckman had died. So this is 1998. And they're reminiscing about Sid Luckman. And the 90-year-old guy says, yeah, it's just too bad we lost Sid. And too bad about his father. And Dan Daly said, what are you talking about? He said, well, you know, the guy went to Sing Sing for murder. And he never saw his son play after high school.
Right.
So I started looking into it myself and finally decided to pick up the phone and call Bob Luckman, Sid's only son, a man who's now in his 70s. And I was so nervous about this because I ordinarily don't investigate crimes past or present. And I knew from the little I had already read that Sid had been a very well-connected guy, not in an organized crime sense, but, you know, he had lots of powerful friends, Joe DiMaggio, Frank Sinatra. He moved in these circles, and I thought, oh, I have to be very careful. So I called Bob Luckman, and I said, I grew up across the street from you. You married my next-door neighbor. You're older than I am, so we never got to meet. Used to play touch football across the street from your father. I would like to write a book about it. And he said, oh, great. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy. I said, the problem is to write a book about him and to interest anybody in publishing it at this point, I've got to write about your grandfather. And then there was absolute silence on the phone. And finally he said, I'm surprised you know about that. And I said, I'm surprised too. I can't believe that it never came out. And there's some very interesting stories I'll tell you later about how it never came out. And he said, well, I'd rather you didn't do that. I said, it's too incredible a story. This is history. It's football history. It's crime history. It's one of the most incredible Jewish family secrets a family has ever kept. So I flew out to Chicago, where I grew up, and met him. And we talked. And I looked around me in the restaurant to see if he had, you know, cronies there watching this whole thing. And he said, listen, I know I can't stop you from doing this. And I said, thank you for that. But I need you to do more than not stop me. I need you to help me because everybody who played with him is basically gone. And I need everything you can tell me, your family can tell me. So we struck a kind of deal that he would tell me the truth. And it turned out that he really didn't know anything. I, at the point where I first met him, already knew about his grandfather's crime than he did because he was almost 50 before he went to his father and said, Dad, you've led this incredible life. Sid's now 75. You've led this incredible life. Why don't you write a book? Not the As Told To book you wrote while you're still playing for the Bears, but about everything that's happened to you. And Sid said, Bobby, I can't. There's something in the family I don't want to come out. And he told Bobby, who hadn't known anything about this. He thought
50 years old, 50 years old, and he didn't know that his grandfather committed murder.
Not only that, but he murdered his grandmother's little brother.
Which is even worse, right?
Yeah. Well, I didn't know the brother-in-law. Maybe there's a worse murder, but where was I? I'm almost done with this part of the story.
Yeah, that's you. And so Bob tells Sid Luckman, Dad, write a book. Sid, go ahead.
And he said, write a book. Sid says, I can't. And so that's kind of it. You know, when your father says, we're not going to talk about something, even if you're almost 50 years old, you generally don't push a powerful father. So he didn't know much. And finally, I realized why there had never been a book about Sid Luckman. I mean, really, one of the most important professional athletes period, one of the most important in the NFL, and one of like a handful of Jews who made it to the Hall of Fame and became icons. I mean, there's Koufax, there's Greenberg. Kind of ends there unless you want to go into swimming. So I took it on myself to be the guy to break this little story and to give Sid his due. Because as I said to Bobby, I said, your father deserves a book, not because his father killed his uncle, but because he was a fantastic athlete, an incredible leader. He changed the game of football along with George Halas and Clark Shaughnessy, who was the architect of the T formation. So let's do this. And I did.
Wow, fascinating. Well, that's just getting started. Well, we're going to go now after a break here, Richard. I'm going to talk about that T formation and the Bears in the early 40s, and then we'll go back to Murder Incorporated and that Jewish mob there in Brooklyn. We got a lot to do. Richard Rosen, the great book on Sid Luckman, Tough Luck. Tough Luck, Eric Spitz. And we continue here on Mad Dog Unleashed.